What a wild weekend. Just a small weekend update for you. First of all, it's beautiful this time of year. I don't know if it's like this everywhere, but certainly in Virginia, gorgeous. We traveled out away from Washington D.C. west into just beautiful country in Virginia, and on the way, I finally stopped by the gun shop I've been meaning to visit in order to get my fingerprints taken to pick up a suppressor. I'm buying a suppressor. For those of you who've been listening to the radio show, I've talked a little bit about this, but I'm getting my first suppressor. Some people call it a silencer, which is great. I'm excited for that. But in order to get a suppressor, you understand the federal government needs all of your information. You've got to run your fingerprints in order to get a suppressor. Like, what? You don't have to run your fingerprints to get a gun. Why do you have to run fingerprints to get a suppressor? So here I am on a machine rolling my fingers on this machine in order to get the government to check off that I'm good to go to have this thing. Like, what? And the other piece of this, and this matters a great deal. This is connects to the president of the United States and the big beautiful bill. The other piece of this is in order to buy a suppressor, you got to pay $200 to the federal government. You got that? Right now, you have to pay. And for those of you who've done this a million times, again, you know what this is about. But the good news is this is going to go away soon. So as it stands right now, you have to pay $200 in order to acquire a, quote, tax stamp to buy a suppressor for a gun to the federal government. That's on top of whatever cost you're already paying to buy the silencer. I'm sorry, what? And here's what the government is doing. First of all, they're trying to stop you from having these accessories. They don't want you to be able to outfit the gun. That's one. But two, it is an end around to create a national registry of people who buy suppressors. You know, there's a great YouTuber, great content creator, conservative gun owner, gun enthusiast, Colleen Noir, who I've been tracking on this story, and he's the one who made me aware, just watching his content. He's the one who made me aware of how all of this works. And it's really straightforward. Basically, the federal government is not, under the Constitution, allowed to track gun owners. They're supposed to have some strategic, respectful, constitutionally mandated distance from gun owners. You have a right to own a gun. The government can't be hovering over you on that right, and at least it's not supposed to be. And so they don't have a national gun registry. It's unconstitutional to keep a national gun registry. But the government finds a way to try and interfere in every aspect of your life. So when it comes to suppressors and short-barreled rifles and other types of items, what they do is they say, okay, you've got to pay a tax on this thing. You got to pay like $200. And when you pay the tax, they track the people who have paid the tax. Oh, so they do have a registry. The registry is created using the tax as a means to do it. It's a backdoor registry in order to track your purchases of things like silencers. Now, here's the great news. This year, the big, beautiful bill, the one that just passed the United States House of Representatives and the Senate, that the president signed into law, what it did was it zeroed out the tax stamp. There's no more fee. Starting January 1st of this coming year, there will no longer be a fee to buy a suppressor, to buy a short barrel rifle. It is $0. Well, that's great. So what does that mean? What does that mean in terms of the registry? Great question. Well, the gun rights groups that exist out there, the National Rifle Association and others, have now filed suit in order to make it so that there is no more registry at all. Because the logic goes, well, if it's $0 to acquire these items, there's no reason to track who paid the tax anymore. In other words, the federal government needs to get rid of this whole process. The fact that I had to go do fingerprints and try and register just to buy a suppressor, in the view of Second Amendment people, gun rights people everywhere, that process shouldn't happen at all. In fact, I should be able to walk into a gun shop, pick out a silencer on the wall, and say, that's the one I want. And then they give it to me, I purchase it, I walk out the door. None of this, no government involvement whatsoever in all of this. So if this lawsuit prevails next year, going into next year, it could be very, very big for the Second Amendment and your Second Amendment rights. That's a big, beautiful law, and I love it. Isn't that great? Anyway, it's just madness to have to go do that. So we did that anyway. We went out. It was a beautiful weekend in Virginia. Went and did my stupid fingerprints in order to get my suppressor. Very excited about that. What else did we do this weekend? We also went out and had a great dinner out in Purcellville, Virginia. Gorgeous Purcellville. It's a really, really great friend of mine has a spectacular restaurant out there, and we just had such a nice time together. Anyway, the point is, it was a wonderful weekend. I hope you had a wonderful weekend too. The President of the United States hit the road, and in fact hit the air this weekend, and flew out in order to start his tour in the Orient. He's visiting the Asian countries right now, and he had a spectacular arrival. He landed in Malaysia, and he started dancing right away. Cut 4 with the Malaysian greeting party. Watch this. Look at this. So funny. Look at this. People dancing around, and the president goes into his YMCA style dance with them. Hilarious. Everybody's all festive in traditional dress, and the president of the United States just standing next to Air Force One, dancing, separated by a velvet rope there. But man, that's so funny. This video, by the way, that I'm showing you has gone mega viral. It was shared by Margot Martin at the White House, and it's got like a bajillion views right now all across social media. President Trump having a great time. It's really funny to watch the guy dancing like that. Anyway, so he got there, and he's doing well already. In fact, as he landed, he signed a peace deal right away between Cambodia and Thailand. He gets the two leaders together, the leaders of Cambodia and Thailand and Malaysia. They all sit down and they sign a peace deal, and they sign deals designed to boost U.S. economic ties in the region to help the American economy. Take a look here as the president signs off on this deal and says, "We did this. The United States did this. The UN, nowhere to be found." Watch.
I mean, the United Nations has such great potential. I wish they could do it. They didn't get involved with us at all. We just did the deal and reported the deal, and everybody was sort of amazed that we got it done so quickly and so nicely. But now I'd like to ask Prime Minister Anwar to say a few words, and then we'll hear from Prime Minister Hun Manet and Prime Minister Newton. And these are, I just have to say it for a last time, these are incredible men. The way they came together, the way they worked so hard. And we worked long hours. It was not long days because the days were few in number, but the hours were very long and very intense. There was a lot of intensity going on because there was a lot of shooting happening while we were talking. That brings it to a new level. And the three men sitting there should really be credited with having done just an incredible job for humanity. Thank you all very much. It's an honor to have worked with you. Appreciate it.
Yet another peace deal. The president just keeps racking them up. This one between Cambodia and Thailand, bringing a tough conflict to a resolution here, formalizing a truce that he had brokered. This was back in July. Now putting ink to paper as he goes to Asia. It's not just peace deals, it's also trade deals. Going into the weekend, there was concern that things were heating up again between China and the United States of America, but the U.S.-China trade war is now taking a breather because negotiators have reached what the Trump administration is referring to as a framework of a trade deal that will avert 100% tariffs that President Trump was looking to impose on China. The president's set to meet with Xi Jinping, which is a fun name, on Thursday of this week, and they'll discuss more. But this trade deal comes, and the markets responded very positively right away to the news that this was happening. We have some updates from Scott Bessent on all of this. Here he is, the Treasury Secretary, cut 6 on the Sunday shows this weekend. Watch.
I can tell you that the soybean farmers are going to be extremely happy with this deal for this year and for the coming years.
A few weeks ago, there was a photographer who snapped a photo of you texting with the agricultural secretary about this. She indicated concern about the unintended damage to American farmers from the U.S. financial lifeline being given to Argentina, because that country was able to sell more to China. That gave Beijing leverage over the United States. Is that leverage still a problem today?
Well, first of all, that the text from Secretary Rollins was talking about a purchase of soybeans that the Chinese did, and Those soybeans were always going to get purchased. They just did it at a time when the Argentines had lifted their export taxes. So those soybeans were always going to be on the market. It's a global market. The three leading suppliers are Brazil, Argentina, and the U.S. And I believe that we have brought the market back into equilibrium, and I believe that the Chinese will be making substantial purchases again.
I believe that the Chinese will be making substantial purchases again. He's referring to U.S. soybeans. Remember, farmers here in the United States very concerned about the deal that President Trump has struck with Argentina. And as we've been taking care of helping Argentina out, a lot of concerns among U.S. farmers. And now in this big trade deal with a huge trading player on the global scale, China, it looks like soybean farmers will stand to benefit big time from this, as Scott Besson is tipping his hand quite a bit here as to what's going on. That's great news. In other words, American farmers right at the center of the concerns. In fact, Scott Besson, this is a detail that I wasn't aware of. Did you know this? That Scott Besson, certainly I knew that he was rich. What I didn't realize that as a part of his immense wealth, he owns a lot of farmland. Scott Besson owns a ton of farmland, including soybean farms in North Dakota. Here's Scott Besson saying, this is an issue that's near and dear to my heart. In fact, I'm a soybean farmer. Watch.
Martha, in case you don't know it, I'm actually a soybean farmer, so I have felt this pain too. And there are a couple of things happening here. One, the Chinese have substantially dropped their purchases to almost zero, so they unfortunately have been using American farmers who are amongst President Trump's biggest supporters. I think he had more than 90% support. And then this was one of the biggest crops in 20 or 30 years, so it was a perfect storm. But I think we have addressed the farmers' concerns, and I'm not going to get ahead of the president, but I believe when the announcement of the deal with China is made public, that our soybean farmers will feel very good about what's going on, both for this season and the coming season.
Anita McGroin in the chat says, he looks like a soybean farmer. Hey, whoa, easy now on Scott Besson. Scott Besson's doing a great job. He's doing a wonderful job. Maybe she means that as a compliment, but perhaps not. I have no idea. But the point is, Scott Besson's great, and right there at the center of the concerns, as usual for the Trump administration, is how does this affect Americans, American jobs? How can we score the best possible deal for, in this case, American farmers? Some very good news here as Scott Besson lays that out. So that's the upside. That's wonderful. That's the China trade deal. Meanwhile, we've got the Canadian trade situation going on. And what I mean by that is President Trump has just announced that Canada is going into timeout over a very dishonest advertisement, a $75 million ad campaign featuring the voice of the late, great President Ronald Reagan. Now, the ad, I'm going to show you the ad now and give you an impression as to what the heck is actually going on. This comes to us from Doug Ford. He's the premier of Ontario, Canada, and he puts this ad together featuring Ronald Reagan in an April 25th, 1987 radio address. And what he does is he clips the former president completely out of context. He plays audio suggesting that Reagan was against all tariffs, always, no matter what, under any circumstance. And he puts this ad together, and he's advertising in the United States of America to try and sow division domestically against the president of the United States, to try and turn Americans, especially Americans who liked Ronald Reagan, against President Trump and somehow to serve Canada's interests. Watch here. This is the ad, cut 9, that, again, a $75 million ad campaign that has caused President Trump to cut Canada off entirely right now. Watch.
When someone says, let's impose tariffs on foreign imports, it looks like they're doing the patriotic thing by protecting American products and jobs. And sometimes for a short while it works, but only for a short time. But over the long run, such trade barriers hurt every American worker and consumer. High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation by foreign countries and the triggering of fierce trade wars. Then the worst happens. Markets shrink and collapse, businesses and industries shut down, and millions of people lose their jobs.
Okay. So Reagan was making an argument against permanent tariffs. He said that tariffs, never-ending, forever tariffs that have no justification whatsoever, are not going to serve you well, that the goal should be free and open trade. But he was not making a flat argument against tariffs as an important tool. In fact, the whole reason he was giving this address back then in 1987 was because he just had imposed tariffs on Japan. That radio address, the little snippet that you heard from the Canadians, the point of that address was to explain why it's important that the president have the power to impose tariffs when necessary, including in his case against Japan. He was arguing against legislation that Congress was proposing to strip the president of his power to impose tariffs. So in other words, the president was doing something, President Reagan was doing something that is being completely distorted, is being completely inverted by that Canadian ad campaign. Here's the balance. Look at this. Here's the rest, cut 11, the rest of the Reagan clip that Canada did not play for you. Watch this.
In certain select cases, like the Japanese semiconductors, we've taken steps to stop unfair practices against American products, but we've still maintained our basic long-term commitment to free trade and economic growth. So, with my meeting with Prime Minister Nakasone and the Venice Economic Summit coming up, it's terribly important not to restrict a president's options in such trade dealings with foreign governments. Unfortunately, some in the Congress are trying to do exactly that. I'll keep you informed on this dangerous legislation because it's just another form of protectionism, and I may need your help to stop it. Remember, America's jobs and growth are at stake.
There he is. There's the Gipper, laying it out, saying, I need the power to impose tariffs. And to be clear, this president of the United States, Donald Trump, uses tariffs for the same goals as Ronald Reagan did. President Trump imposes tariffs defensively. It is not an offensive use of tariffs. He is not starting trade wars. He wants to end them. We've had way too many leaders in the United States who have not fought back on our behalf, who have not used the tools at their disposal to protect America from unfair trade practices. This president of the United States looks at tariffs that are imposed on the United States, on trade restrictions by places like Canada, imposed on the United States, on unfair trade practices imposed on us by places like China, the theft of intellectual property being done by China, the use of slave labor in order not to compete on a free and fair market, but instead in a corrupted one, using exploited labor in order to hold down costs, or state-funded subsidies in order to suppress the costs of those goods. That's why the president's fighting back. That's why he's fighting back. And so when you hear Ronald Reagan say, yeah, under certain circumstances, you've got to impose tariffs, that's what President Trump is saying as well. More ahead on this edition of Vince. So you've got the Canadians running this insane ad, and I just showed you what the truth is. Reagan said, yeah, of course you need tariffs, and the Congress shouldn't restrict the president's ability to impose them when it's, obviously in the service of protecting the American people. And so here's what Doug Ford, here's the premier of Ontario. You remember his brother was Rob Ford, the insane mayor of Toronto. He's the guy who is kind of like Chris Farley, if Chris Farley was in charge of a major Canadian city. So Doug Ford, his brother, is, again, the premier in Ontario. And he says the whole reason he's running the ad is because he wants MAGA people to be fighting with Reagan Republicans. Don't take my word for it. Here is Doug Ford saying what he intended the ad to do. Cut 10, watch.
I heard that the president heard our ad. I'm sure he wasn't too happy, but it's real because it was coming from the best president the country's ever seen, Ronald Reagan. So it's very effective. It's probably one of the best ads I've ever seen, and it's coming from Ronald Reagan's voice, and it's going to be focused on right across the country, but also in Republican-held areas, because what I feel, the Reagan Republicans are going to be fighting with a MAGA group.
That's his plan. He wants Reagan Republicans fighting with MAGA because he thinks that that will result in Canada being able to get away with murder when it comes to trade, and that the United States will just wave the white flag of surrender if the Reagan people are fighting with the MAGA people. Now, of course, Reagan and MAGA people, there's a dramatic overlap between those two categories. In fact, the coalition's only grown in a lot of ways. And anyway, so that's the plan out of Canada. President Trump doesn't like any of this. He says the ad is very crooked. And here he is, cut 8, reacting to it.
Well, you know, it's a crooked ad. I heard he's airing it. Canada, that's why I pulled everything. Canada, they did a crooked ad. They knew it was Ronald Reagan loved tariffs. What they did is really dishonest. And I heard they were pulling the ad. I didn't know they were putting it on a little bit more. They could have pulled it tonight. Well, that's dirty playing, but I can play dirtier than they can, you know?
I can play dirtier than they can. President Trump has abruptly called off trade negotiations, the New York Post reports, with Canada after the Ontario government funded an anti-tariff ad campaign featuring the voice of Reagan. President Trump wrote on Truth Social, quote, "The Ronald Reagan Foundation has just announced that Canada fraudulently used an advertisement, which is fake, featuring Ronald Reagan speaking negatively about tariffs." He said the ad was made to, quote, "interfere with the decision of the United States Supreme Court and other courts in cases challenging Trump's authority to issue tariffs." So in case you were wondering, what the heck is this all about? Was Reagan really against tariffs? Well, in the end, Ronald Reagan wanted free and fair trade. And both Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump are fighting for that outcome. That's what's happening. That's actually going on. Thank you to the president, continuing to keep the good fight. Love that. Also, the fight continues domestically. You know, we're in day 27 of the United States government shutdown. And for most people, it's not really changing your life too much that the government's shut down. You're probably hoping that the president fires more people, more of the deadbeats in the federal government. Not everybody, but certainly the deadbeats in the federal government. Thousands of people have been laid off now. Here's to thousands more. And but here's the downside. One of the many downsides of the government shutdown. U.S. military continues not to be paid, and there is a food stamp apocalypse apparently coming in November. Nearly half of all of the states in the country are now warning food stamp recipients that they may not be able to access that form of welfare going forward. And in fact, food banks are worried that they're not going to be able to handle the slam. In case, you know somebody in this circumstance, if you're in this circumstance, you have nobody to blame but Democrats here. It is out of control, these Democrats. They are refusing to reopen the government at all, despite the fact that President Trump just keeps asking them, hey, would you do it? Would you do it? Here's Scott Bessent, Cut 12 from the weekend shows, pointing out how stupid it is to blame Donald Trump for this circumstance. Watch.
Why did President Trump have to meet with Democrats? Democrats just need to go into the Senate and vote to end the shutdown.
Let's look at the numbers. President Trump has said in the past, it's up to the president.
52.
He's the president.
No.
He said that in the past. He said you have to be a leader. The president has to lead. You have to get people into a room. You have to get a deal. When's he going to do that?
Well, he is leading, and there's no deal to do with Chuck Schumer. Chuck Schumer is trading off his polls. What's different than when he passed a clean CR in the spring? It's his polls. You know, the whole country's being held captive to AOC's polls. Well, let's look at the numbers. It's 52-3. 52 Republicans have voted, I believe it's 11 times, to reopen the government. 3 Democrats have.
Yeah. So these Democrats have no idea what they're doing. They're totally captured by the radicals in their party. It is true that Chuck Schumer is doing everything he can to stop a primary threat from AOC, who, by the way, was campaigning this weekend with Zoran Mamdani. They're all screaming on stages together about how much they love socialism. These are the crazy people that the left is beholden to. It's the reason why the government shut down, and it's the reason why young enlisted guys with families are not going to be receiving paychecks going forward. It's because of those Democrats. That's just the truth. And there's a lot of discontent on the left with their own leadership. They're all hating on each other. This really couldn't happen to a better party. I mean, in fact, look at CBS. CBS has turned on Hakeem Jeffries, the leader in the House. They're calling him an election denier. Now, we saw these reports already that there's an effort to replace Hakeem Jeffries. They think that he's too slow-witted, which is true, actually. He is slow-witted. To be the head of the Democrats in the House, they don't think that he's effective. Here is CBS now turning on him in the service of ejecting Hakeem Jeffries as the leader of the Democrats in the House. Cut 13. Watch this.
Recently, you've been using the term rigged elections in reference to the upcoming midterms. Democrats were appalled when President Trump used language like that. How do you justify using that now? Doesn't that undermine faith for voters you need to show up?
No, I've been using that term in the context of Donald Trump's unprecedented effort to gerrymander congressional maps in a partisan fashion all across the country in order to rig the midterm elections and deny the ability of the American people to actually decide who should be in the majority as it relates to the House of Representatives.
You know, Democrats are also going through gerrymandering and redistricting.
No. Well, Democrats are going to push back aggressively to make sure that we have fair maps across the country.
Isn't that great? So we've gotten to the point now where CBS is accusing Hakeem Jeffries of being an election denier, an election rigger, a partisan gerrymanderer. It's amazing. What happened? Oh, Democrats are angry at their own leadership. They're mad that Trump is winning. That's what's happening. We've seen this phenomenon before. Remember, Democrats only turn on their own the moment that they want to dispense with them because they are serving as an impediment to long-term Democrat power. What happened to Biden? Remember? Biden is the nominee of his own party. He's the only person who even ran in the primary for that party in 2024. He gets the nod, and then the Democrat Party throws him out unceremoniously after his disastrous debate performance. By the way, that debate kind of arranged in order to be a test run to see whether or not he should stay in the race to begin with. They put the big hook around him and they drag him off stage. That's what happened. And they all turned on him in a second. Remember, the media did it at the same moment. They all turned on him at the very same moment. You're witnessing it happening here. Why is CBS turning on Hakeem Jeffries? Why is that happening? Why are they calling him an election denier? Because they're done with him. He sucks, and they need somebody else because their power's on the line, and they're tired of Donald Trump's victories. All right, coming up, the great Chris Bedford joins us from The Blaze. We will chat with him about everything going on in the world. Hold tight. More ahead on this edition of Vince. Let's see what we got here. Well, look what we have. Chris Bedford is here. He's a senior politics editor for The Blaze. He's a writer at The Federalist, The Telegraph, The New Criterion, The Spectator, Fox, American Mind, The Washington Examiner, The Daily Caller, Compact, and The New York Post. That's not even possible. I think he just made that all up. Hello, Chris Bedford. Great to have you with us today, brother.
Great to be here, Vince. How you doing? Happy Monday.
I'm doing so good. We're on day 27 of the government shutdown. Let me get your general thoughts on the state of this shutdown and how you think it's playing out. How do you think the two sides are doing as this thing continues?
I've been pretty impressed with Johnson and Thune actually sticking together, holding the line, being a team on this. That's not something we've previewed. This is one of Thune's first big tests as Senate Majority Leader. And it's the first big test that Johnson has passed, really, as House Majority Leader, Speaker of the House. The same time, I actually thought this was going to be a short shutdown. I assumed everyone knew that Chuck Schumer couldn't back away from this fight. But Chuck Schumer and everyone with a brain knew that the president had held all the cards. Republicans held all the cards here. There was nothing they could actually do to try and pull $1 trillion Democratic handout out of one of 3 funding bills that were scheduled to go through for this year. Right. They had no cards. They had no hand, but they had to fight. And I thought, maybe a week or two will actually do it to show their base that they're fighting. But now they don't seem to have an off-ramp. They don't really seem to know where to go. Maybe it's going to be November 1st. when you've got, like you were just talking about a moment ago, 36 states are saying that they're going to run out of programs, that they're not going to actually be able to pay for supplement for food stamps for people. The the actual fact that the air traffic controllers aren't getting paid. I don't know if you've flown recently. The first couple of weeks, TSA was pretty good spirits. That's starting to change. They're legally required to show up at work, but they can call in sick. And when you've been working for weeks without a paycheck, that starts to happen. A donor gave over $100 million to help some of the military service members get paid, but they've got another paycheck coming out, and they're not going to be
Yeah.
able to find all of this money to be able to do it.
$130 million, by the way, is not going to be anywhere near enough. It's a really generous thing,
No.
but every pay period is about $6 billion for the United States military. So that's just $130 million is like, well, that's great. That's super generous, but you can only go so far doing that.
Exactly. And we were at the collar together when Obama did his shutdown. Remember the lengths he went through in order to make it as painful as possible. In my neighborhood, they put caution tape and closed the book drop-off box in the park. They removed the water fountain handles from the C&O Canal Trail. They shut down the local Georgetown kayaking place. They said it was unsafe. They tried to stop World War II veterans from getting to their memorial. They tried to rope off the Mount Vernon parking lot because no one had told the National Park Service that they actually don't own that. It's privately funded by the ladies of Mount Vernon. They had to take that down. They shut down roads, and the American people felt it, and the press talked about it every day.
Yeah.
This time, the press hasn't really talked about it. The president's
Yeah,
gone
and they're
to
not talking about it
great
because
lengths.
Democrats own it.
Hmm?
They're not talking about the shutdown because Democrats own it. So, in other words, like the media is doing a lot to mitigate this. That shutdown you just referred to, the Obama shutdown, CNN had a counter on its screen for what day we were in during the shutdown because they thought that it could be used to damage Republicans. There's no counter right now. And the reason for that is because Democrats own this thing. President Trump's approval rating has gone up during this shutdown, Chris Bedford.
Yeah, and I mean, the president here is going to try and make a deal with them. And he's got a position of power. One, he's got a position of power. Two, he cannot give in. He
Right.
can't give the Democrats what they're asking for because if he does, he's going to do it 2 more times this year, and it will basically almost make him a lame duck, even before he's actually reached the midterm elections with his ability to form Republicans in Congress. They have all the cards here. However, there are some things that the president probably might give up. Like he's not as ideologically committed as maybe some of us are, to the reductions in force that Russ Vogt has pushed through in the federal workforce. That's something he's done to penalize Democrats. It's within his power. Says, you know what? You're not just furloughed. You're actually fired. There's no money for your program. This is over. You can reapply for your job if that money ever shows up again, and we'll consider it.
Yeah.
It seems like a brilliant move, but he'll give that to Democrats and hire those people back in exchange for it. Democrats want to vote to try and stop the $50 to $100 increase in Obamacare premiums that's coming at the end of the year. Say you'll get a vote and then give them that off ramp. Because November 1st, it's going to change. And the local papers are starting to finally cover this because, well, you haven't seen planes falling out of the sky. You haven't seen veterans barred from their memorial. People are going to actually start to feel the impact of this. Plane travel is going to become more and more delayed. Pray God there's no actual accidents or anything like that in an already
Right.
stressed out system. But welfare benefits that some people are reliant on are not going to come through. They're not going to be there. And some of this, folks, you're losing it just in time for the holiday season. You know, we got Thanksgiving, you got Christmas. This starts to put a lot of pressure on really both parties. And
But this
I like
is
Thune's idea, which is you need to have more votes now. You need a standalone vote to fund air traffic controllers, a standalone
Yeah.
vote to pay the military, a standalone vote to pay TSA and federal law enforcement, and let the Democrats say no to that, and then try to broadcast it as best you can.
And they are voting against those as Thune keeps presenting them. So here's the thing that's driving me crazy amongst all of this. It's like we have to wait on Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer to come to their senses. That's really what this is about. And so at some point, does John Thune say, to hell with these idiots, I'm going nuclear. I don't want the 60 vote threshold for this anymore. We can't withstand it. Let's just do a simple majority in the Senate. Do you see a scenario where he does that? There hasn't been much chatter about that. I saw the White House was asked about it last week, and Caroline Leavitt said, hey, I don't want to get ahead of the president, whatever he wants to recommend on that subject. But it does seem that at some point, you've got to be able to run the country if Democrats are trying to block that from happening.
I think if Thune and the White House were solely in charge of this, you would see that. Absolutely. But this Republicans aren't going to want to back. There's not enough support amongst Republicans in the Senate to do that. They're not willing to give up what it's an austere body essentially, and it holds on to very closely a lot of its old practices and traditions. And you would need a bunch of folks to agree with Thune and Trump, and that's going to be more difficult for them to get. However, they could start to peel off Democrats to some of these votes. I mean, they've already
Yeah.
peeled off 5 Senate Democrats to actually pass the House bill. These other ones will be more difficult, the standalone bills, and that actually gives a conceivable path to getting 60. I mean, and at the same time, you wonder, Democrats, are they benefiting from this politically? Well, in Virginia, we've seen record numbers of early voting. It's a lot of furloughed people who are getting out there to vote. Never mind the fact that the entire Democratic delegation from Virginia, including Allison Spanberger running for governor, voted for this shutdown and are obstinate in their support for this shutdown. It's
Right.
actually probably going to end up pushing Democrats more to the polls in Virginia because of these furloughs and all these government employees who have time to vote early. And that's another benefit the Democrats are getting at the moment.
Yeah, and that might be by design as well. Speaking of Democrats and insanity, the conniption fit over the fact that President Trump is building a beautiful new ballroom at the White House continues. Eric Swalwell, who is such an idiot to hilarious levels, actually, he tweeted this weekend that whoever becomes the Democrat nominee needs to make it part of their platform that they will destroy the White House ballroom. Which, I mean, last I checked, that remind me if I'm wrong here, Chris Bedford, but I thought destroying any building on the White House campus was equivalent to destroying the White House itself. So therefore, I think Eric Swalwell is now calling for destroying the White House. What do you make of the hysteria around this? This seems like one of the most, in a world full of insane made-up scandals, this seems like one of the most insane.
There's two aspects to it, right? I mean, there's you can't argue with beauty.
Right.
And the renderings that have come out right now, well, a little big, are beautiful. So Democrats were really quiet on this. Of course, they'd be stupid to just leave the videos of White House destruction on the ground. I remember when Trump first, I remember you've seen this from back in the Tea Party days, where the cover of the Nation or the Atlantic or something was an elephant tearing down the Capitol and stomping on the White House. Democrats love this stuff. They can't not do it and show that political imagery, but they've gone too far. And when the editorial board of the Washington Post is telling you, calm down, everybody in DC knows that this is needed.
Right.
Nobody in DC actually likes the East Wing office space. Aside from the hallway and Christmas, it's not a nice place. It's dilapidated. It's beat up. It's needed to be changed for a very long time. The only reason it hasn't been changed in so long is because no president, except for Trump, wants to spend a couple of years of their term in a construction zone. It's not even fun to do improvements on your own home. It causes friction with the family, with the kids, with the wife. It's hard to work from
Trump
there when
loves
your
it, by
office
the
is
way.
next door.
Trump said recently that it's one of the most beautiful sounds he knows. You know, it's like Obama loves the sound of the Muslim, prayer or whatever, but Trump loves the sound of construction. He said recently that he loves hearing the sound. Normally it represents dollar signs, he said, but this time he goes, I'm not making any money. In fact, I'm just losing money, but I love the sound of it. I love to be able to wake up and hear the sound of construction at the White House.
I love that. I don't share that love for waking up to the sound of construction, but I know he's got different sleeping hours than me. Probably around the same now that I got a 1 year old as well as all the school schedules. Maybe we're on the same timeline finally. But there's some as one Twitter user pointed out over the weekend, Hitler did also tear down the East Wing of the White House to replace it with a ballroom. So this Democratic freakout is kind of making sense. At least if he builds a Death Star with a McDonald's on top and makes it gold plated, I think it'll all be worthwhile. And I dare any Democrat to knock down that super weapon.
It's so amazing. It's such a great, hilarious story. And it's once again, it's revealing because as you know, and you've been following, you wrote a whole book on it, actually, Chris Bedford, The Art of the Donald. His whole existence has been deeply clarifying for the institutions that exist within our country. That he's the great clarifier of our age. Not only is he the weapon that we sent to break up the cartel, to break up the establishment, but he also reveals where everybody's loyalties lie. I mean, if you are angry that Donald Trump is building a ballroom at the White House and you're expressing that view in public, you're exposed, baby. Like Trump has exposed you just by doing something good for the country.
and it's undeniably good. I mean, the tense situation has been awful. But there's so much misinformation out there. I mean,
Yeah.
just this past weekend, I was out talking to some folks who were mentioning how Donald Trump had torn up the Rose Garden. No, he hadn't. He hadn't gotten rid of the flowers. He'd gotten rid of the grassy area and replaced the mud that was there with some
Yep.
stone. But they'll say, "Oh, he's tearing that down. Oh, look at what he's doing to the east side." And what shocked me also is the number of reporters who have been to the White House, who seem to confuse the East Room, which is a nice room, with the East Wing. They didn't seem to know the difference. Or the DNC, the poor DNC staffer, put out a tweet that showed Buckingham Palace and saying, "Look at what Donald Trump is tearing down." That's not what Donald Trump is tearing down. It's literally office space. However, there's some real beauty there. I mean, these are Latrobe columns. Some of them were installed by Thomas Jefferson. When I saw that, I reached out to some folks who are on the project and said, "What are you doing with those? Can I buy one of those?" And they, thank God, they're actually holding on to them for those historic bits and including them in the final construction that they come up with.
Are they really? So they're taking pieces of the old East Wing and including them in the new East Wing?
Yes, some of the historic aspects will be included in the new East Wing. We don't want to get rid of some of those beautiful columns and the historical aspect of them. But what I'm pushing for is, you remember you used to be able to go to the Reagan Library and get a little bit of the Berlin Wall? I've got one on my shelf.
Me too.
Can they start? And they did that with Yankee Field and they tore it up. I got one for my dad. It's maybe the only birthday present he ever actually liked and kept around. The If they would do that with bits of the historic aspects of the East Wing, sell them at the White House gift shop. I mean,
Yeah.
I think I'd buy one right away.
Yeah, no, it could be good. Well, maybe I'll get you it for Christmas. I don't want to tell you, but you'll have a piece of Big Mike's old office. Thank you, Chris Bedford. It's great to talk to you as always from the Blaze. Keep up the great work, sir.
Great to see you. Thanks, Vince.
There he is, Chris Bedford, soon to be the proud owner of a piece of Big Mike's old office. Thank you. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Hawkida, what a name. Smash the like, smash the like, smash the like, would you, for those of you in the chat today? Or gently tap the like button sufficient that it registers a like. Whatever's necessary, however much effort you want to put in. Our thanks again to Chris Bedford for being here. Hey, I've got some FO. You ready? You guys ready for some FAFO to stare at today, to hear about today? This comes to us from the great city, but the struggling city, unfortunately, of Chicago. The way that this starts today is a Chicago Tribune reporter by the name of Laura Rodriguez this weekend posted a video of a hefty woman getting truck sticked by an immigration enforcement official. This looks like this guy's from Border Patrol based on his jacket. And check out this video. Boom goes the dynamite as this guy shoves this lady backwards and she falls on her immense posterior and flattens to the ground. Look, can we do that one more time? Boom, down she goes. Down she goes. And then they jump in a white van that is the immigration enforcement officials, and they drive off. And as they're driving off, somebody throws a rock at them. Boom, we watch it again. Can we do that in slow-mo at some point? Is that possible? Justin, can we slow that video down? Can you hand scroll that video so we can see this woman getting sustained contact and then falling to the ground? It is amazing. Ready? Here we go. Moment by moment. Boom. And it looks like what does she have in her arms? She's got some sort of weird, she's got her phone, of course. Everyone's always got their phone. She's got some sort of weird hot pink jacket or something, maybe a handbag. She was clearly getting up in the face of the ICE official, the Border Patrol official. She gets flattened. Boom, bitch, get out the way. This is a wild thing to watch. So what happened here? Well, the Chicago Tribune reporter shared it and said that it was an awful thing. She said it was a very disturbing video from today's ICE and CBP operations in Avondale. An officer pushed a woman to the ground. People got angry and throw what seems to be a rock towards the moving unmarked vehicle. This appears to be the new normal in Chicago. She's very upset about this. But, of course, the Chicago Tribune reporter, who last I checked, what's a reporter supposed to do? Oh, that's it. Report on the news. Tell you what actually is happening. Didn't tell you the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey might say. Here's the rest of the story. Here, from DHS Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin. sharing the rest of the video. Here's what the Chicago Tribune reporter left out. Can you, fellas, show us this? Here's the woman attacking the officer, grabbing his face and ripping his mask down. Watch. Bottom right-hand corner of the frame. Camera will pan. Watch this. Pull. She grabs at his face. She pulls his mask down off of his face, which I believe when you grab the guy's face, that qualifies as assault. So in order to establish distance between himself and her, well, he just planted his arms into her and knocked her on her immense posterior. Boom goes the dynamite, and he climbs in the car. They drive off, again, under assault as people are throwing rocks at them. So this is supposed to be the scandal? The scandal is that the ICE officers, the Border Patrol officers are doing their job in Chicago? Yeah, the media are misrepresenting the sequence of events once again to inflame passions against federal law enforcement, which has seen an over 1,000% increase in assaults. Here's a local news report on what exactly went down in Chicago in this neighborhood. Take a look here as we get a Chicago news report. This is Old Irving Park in Chicago. This is in the northern area of Chicago, in the suburbs. And this, just to be clear, is an area that voted 80% for the Democrats with each passing presidential election. Here's a local report on the immigration enforcement operations happening in that community. Watch.
Tamon, at least 3 people appear to have been arrested. Witnesses I spoke with say they were shocked over what happened and also want to know why federal agents approached a landscaper who was working in the area. Brian Culp says he was sitting on his couch drinking a cup of coffee when he started hearing loud noises. When he looked outside, he saw federal agents arresting someone on his front lawn.
And then I think I heard one of the whistles. I think that's what caught my attention. And then they tackled him right here, just right in my front yard.
Tear gassing Old Irving Park.
This was the scene that unfolded shortly after in Chicago's Irving Park neighborhood. In this video taken near Kildare and Waveland, neighbors are confronting the agents. You can also see tear gas in the air and agents pinning people.
Okay, all right, pause for a second. So this dude, the dude at the top of the video, Kolb, he's an attorney. He's a left-wing attorney. And the reason I know that is because he keeps popping up in all of the coverage this weekend from this immigration enforcement going on in this community of Old Irving Park, okay? And so it's the same guy, all of the same news outlets keep talking to him. He's a complete Democrat. He's a left-winger. He's going out. He hates that immigration enforcement is doing his job in the neighborhood. This is his big moment, so it's very dramatic for him. It was happening in my front yard. I was appalled. I couldn't believe what was happening. And then listen, and in the images you just saw, and certainly in the description you just got, what ends up happening is immigration officials are making arrests. They've identified people that need to be taken into custody. And they have an entire neighborhood of shitlibs who are showing up, who are pouring out of their front doors, and they're obstructing law enforcement. They're going up, what are you doing? What are you doing? They're shoving the cops. They're getting in their way. They're grabbing their masks. They're pulling them down. And this is federal law enforcement just trying to do their jobs. So the frame up on these stories is somehow the immigration guys, the law enforcement, are the bad guys in this scenario. And not the lunatics, the left-wing banshees who are descending upon them, grabbing at them, shoving them, obstructing them, pushing them. You're not allowed to do this. What are you doing? Their jobs. Stay out of their way as they do it. Stay out of their way. And if you get in their way, then you will FO. That's how it works. And what? And, of course, local Chicago media, we're seeing all sorts of credulous coverage of, oh, this is really awful. This is like, what a bunch of Nazis, brown shirts. These guys are just doing just insane things. No, they're doing totally legitimate things. This is what we voted for. Immigration enforcement? Yes. You think we weren't serious about that? Of course we are. Of course we're serious about that. People are mad. They're using tear gas. Why would they deploy tear gas? Why would they deploy smoke? Why would they deploy any of this? It's because they're trying to stop a riot. It's crowd control. They're being surrounded and impeded and attacked. And there's been a massive uptick in assaults against these guys. So cry me a river as these guys are enforcing the law. They're going out there and they're showing up in places like Chicago. And for those of us who have desired this type of action, which is like, hey, mass deportations, actually enforce the law, get people who've invaded our country out of it. They're doing it. They're doing it. And they don't get a lot of credit for it. They don't get a lot of support. In fact, all they get in general is demonized by the media. And I'm here to tell you, and I'm here to tell them, keep up the good work. We notice what you're doing. You have our support. Whatever you need, let us know. And at the very end of the day, as always, you got our prayers that are with you. But boy, it's just amazing that they try and do their jobs. They're under attack, which is why every time I see one of these FAFO videos, I'm all over it. That if you want to get in their faces, grab their masks. Why are they wearing masks? Because their families are under attack from left-wing lunatics. You want to grab their masks, you're going to get your big fat ass planted on the ground, woman. And I don't care if you're a lady. If you're going to assault somebody, you got to live with the consequences. And I love it. It's always like, oh, but she's a lady. Well, then don't assault anybody. You don't have to assault anybody. Lady or fella, you don't have to assault anybody. And that's what they're doing. So you do that, you're going to get planted. And she's lucky she didn't get arrested. She's lucky that there wasn't more, that they didn't, tackle her and take her into custody. He just shoved her backwards. And the left is acting like this is some injustice. It's like a human rights violation. Nope. Show me again. This is, just so you know, these are the consequences of your actions. That's what happens. That's what happens. You want to try it? Go for it. Find out. Unreal what they're doing. But immigration enforcement continuing to enforce the law, that's great news. Hey, we close today with a look into the future. Who's going to run for president in 2024? On the Republican side, a lot of chatter around J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio. 2028, my goodness. 2028. J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio are the people that a lot of people think might be the nominee, one of the two. On the other side, among the Democrats, we've got a couple of idiots champing at the bit. First and foremost, Gavin Newsom has announced what we already knew. He desperately wants to run for president. Cut 16. Watch the greasy California governor.
After the 2026 midterms, you're going to give it serious thought.
Yeah, I'd be lying otherwise. I'd just be lying, and I can't do that.
Governor, you have long said that if you ever run for the White House, you need a compelling why, a reason. Are you moving closer to figuring out your own why and your own decision?
Yeah, Nietzsche said if you have a compelling why, you can endure any how. And so I think the biggest challenge for anyone who runs for any office is people see right through you if you don't have that why. You're doing it for the wrong reasons.
I love how he's pretending he's Mr. Authentic. If you're not telling the truth, then people can tell you're lying. That's one of the things I've learned in politics. As I am consistently running for president and making my state more crappy with each passing day. Thanks, Gavin Newsom. Thank you. You are transparent. We can see clean through you. And then there's Kamala Harris, who, of course, basically made the announcement with the BBC this weekend, of all places, that she wants to be the president again. Here she is, heavily implying that she intends to run again.
When are they going to see a woman in charge in the White House? In their lifetime, for sure. Could it be you? Possibly. Have you made a decision yet? No, I have not. But you say in your book, I'm not done. That is correct. I am not done. I have lived my entire career a life of service, and it's in my bones. And there are many ways to serve. I've not decided yet what I will do in the future beyond what I am doing right now.
The interviewer went on to say that that according to the betting websites right now, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson has a better chance of becoming president than Kamala Harris. Kamala didn't like that. She didn't like that at all. She was very angry about that. Boy, I don't know about you, but I'm cutting a check to Kamala Harris's presidential campaign right now. Can't wait for her to be the Democrat nominee again. Let's see if she actually has to win a vote this time.